18th of September, Meri Popins. Meri Popins by Primary London Travellers. Chapter 1. The East Wind. Cherry Tree Lane is a nice London street. On one side there were houses, on the other there was a park. The cherry trees go dancing light in the middle. Number 17, there is the smallest house in the street. The Bankses live in this house. Bear 6, Miss and Mrs. Banks, and have 4 children, Jane, Michael, and the twins, Barbara and John. Mrs. Banks has a lot of housework, and she hasn't nurse to help her with the children. But one day the nurse left them, and Mrs. Banks didn't know what to do. Read to the newspaper, said Mr. Banks, and the nurses walked home. I'm sorry, but now must go to work. They kissed his wife on her nose and went away to the city. The city was a place where Mr. Banks went every day. There, he sat in a long desk and made money. He was very busy with it. And he brought some money home in his little black bag. Sometimes he gave some to Jane and Michael, but sometimes he didn't and said, "The bank is broken." When Mr. Banks went to work, Mrs. Banks began to read letters to the newspapers. Upstairs in the nursery, Jane and Michael were waiting for their father. It was a winter evening, and the east wind was blowing through the cherry trees. "Look, the trees are dancing," cried Jane. "That's Daddy over there," said Michael. "That's not Daddy," she said. "It's somebody else." It was a woman with her hat on and a bag in her right hand. Suddenly, a strange thing happened. The wind lifted her up and brought her to the garden door. When the woman opened it, the wind lifted her up again and carried her at the front door. "Let's go and see who it is," said Jane. They left the room to have a look at the visitor. Jane and Michael could see that she was thin and had black hair and blue eyes. "They're very nice and they're quiet children," said Mrs. Banks. But unfair, she didn't believe it. The nursery was upstairs, and the woman found it Mrs. Banks, but she slid up the banisters. Down, of course, the children often did it themselves, but up, never. "Well, children," said Mrs. Banks, "this is your new nurse, Meri Popins." Meri Popins looked at them carefully. At last, the woman gave a long, loud sniff and said, "All right, I'll stay." When Mrs. Banks left the nursery, Jane and Michael came up to Meri Popins. "How did you come?" Jane asked. "Did the wind blow you here?" "It did," said Meri Popins, "and no more." And she gave another sniff and opened her bag. "What a funny bag," Michael said. "There was nothing inside." But the next moment, Meri Popins took out a white apron, a large cake of soap, a toothbrush, a packet of hairpins, a bottle of perfume, and a small armchair. Jane and Michael were shocked. Then Meri Popins took out a large bottle of medicine. "Is that your medicine?" asked Michael. No, it's yours, said Mary Popins. I don't want it, I won't. But suddenly Michael understood, but he could not say no to her. He closed his eyes and opened his mouth. Strawberry ice, he said. More, more, more. But Mary Popins, with her cold eyes, came up to Jane. Her spoon was full of something green and yellow. Sweet lemon juice. I love it, Jane said. But when Mary Popins came to the twins with a bottle, she cried, Oh no, it's not good for them, please. But Mary Popins didn't look at her. She brought the spoon to John's mouth. He drank it, and Jane thought there was milk on the spoon. Then Mary Popins opened her bag and took out 11 pajamas, a pair of boots, a set of dominoes, 2 baking caps, and a book. Then came of bed. Jane and Michael were very surprised. Now they knew that something strange and wonderful happened in her house. Mary Popins, said Michael, will you never hear less? Till the wind changes, she said, and went to bed.